Welcome to Timeless Religious Stories, where faith, struggle, and divine moments come to life. New stories shared daily.
I was born in Bayou St. Clair, Louisiana, where the air itself holds memory. The kind of place where porch steps groan like they got secrets. Where the magnolia trees don't bloom unless somebody dies or gets saved. My name's Loretta Mayhill. My grandmother used to say, "Girl, this world ain't but a waiting room for what's real." She'd rock back and forth in that wicker chair, the one with the split cane seat, eyes rolled back just enough to look like she was talking to someone I couldn't see. But I think I heard him. Even back then. The first time I remember the world cracking open just a little was when I was 6. I was playing with marbles in the hallway. Green ones. The ones that looked like trapped fireflies. And I heard a sound. Not like a voice, not quite, but a dragging sound, slow, like something was being pulled across the floorboards underneath me. There was no basement. No crawl space. Just dirt and bones under that house. I ran to my mama, but she was frying okra and trying to keep the baby from eating ash out the fireplace. She didn't hear a thing. But I knew that sound. It was real. Like something deep under the floor wanted to be let out, or remembered. Fast forward 32 years and a couple lifetimes. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia now. Working double shifts at Piedmont Hospital as a CNA. Living alone. No husband. No babies. Just plants that keep dying and a Bible on the nightstand I read more out of guilt than faith. I wasn't ready for death when it came. But I had started dreaming about it. 3 nights before it happened, I saw a vision, dark ocean water, still as oil, and a figure standing on it barefoot. Couldn't see his face, but he had the kind of silence that makes you kneel without knowing why. The day I died, it was raining sideways. Atlanta rain don't fall. It attacks. I'd been feeling a stabbing kind of pain just under my ribs for weeks. Thought it was gallstones or stress. I'd seen too many people die to be dramatic about it. But this day, the pain didn't pass. I was walking down the hospital corridor when everything flipped. Not fell. Flipped. Like gravity got tired of holding me. The floor was still there, but it wasn't mine anymore. I dropped. Like my soul had been pulled down by that same dragging sound I'd heard as a child. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in a hospital. I wasn't in Atlanta. I wasn't even on Earth, if I'm honest. I was in a place that looked like sky but felt like water. And I was standing. Whole. Pain-free. No name badge. No age. No skin. Just me. And he was there. Not in the way paintings show him. No blonde hair. No blue eyes. He was more shadow than shape. More question than man. But I knew it was Jesus. Not because someone told me. Because everything in me recognized him the way a burnt house recognizes fire. He looked at me, and time stopped like it owed him money. He said nothing. But I heard everything. And then he said, "You have asked your whole life without knowing it. And now I will answer you." When Jesus spoke, his voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from behind me, from above me, from inside my blood, like it had been living there all along and just now decided to say hello. "You have asked your whole life without knowing it. And now I will answer you." I didn't know whether to bow or run. But my body didn't move. Not from fear, because there wasn't any. Not yet. There was just a knowing. Like standing at the edge of something that's always been waiting. The place we stood in, it wasn't heaven. Don't let the light fool you. There was no gold, no harps, no singing choirs. The light here moved like liquid. Like syrup dripping in reverse. It touched me without warmth. It saw me. That's the only word I have for it. It saw every version of me, young, old, scared, tired, loud, soft. And it held them all at once. Like God keeps every edition of your soul on a shelf somewhere. Behind Jesus, the air opened. Not like a door. More like skin splitting. From the tear came water, slow, black water, smooth as onyx. It didn't splash. It glided. A whole river that flowed out of a wound in the sky. This is the water that remembers, he said. The river moved like it had its own mind. And when I looked into it, I saw faces, millions of them, dark-skinned, light-skinned, braided, bald, scarred, glowing. Some were laughing, some were screaming. Some were both. I saw my grandmother. Not as she died, but as she danced at 19. I saw a man with a noose around his neck smile before the rope pulled. I saw a white baby being nursed at a black woman's breast, and the milk turned to ink. I saw cities burning in silence, because no one above ground could hear the fire cry. And then I saw myself. A child. Then a nurse. Then something else. A version of me I had never met, but always felt behind my left shoulder, watching, waiting. What am I looking at? I asked him. He didn't answer right away. His eyes, yes, eyes now, dark as iron, looked through me, not at me. You are looking at the price of forgetting, he said. I didn't understand. Not fully. But the water began to whisper. And I remembered. I remembered walking through Walmart, hearing a white woman clutch her purse tighter when she saw me. I remembered smiling to show I was safe. Palatable. Worthy. I remembered straightening my hair before job interviews so I wouldn't seem difficult. I remembered watching videos of black men being killed and telling myself, don't cry, it's just another Tuesday. I remembered wondering, deep down, what it would feel like to be white, not because I wanted to be, but because I wanted to stop being watched. And the river whispered back all the things I had buried under politeness, under survival, under exhaustion. That's when I started to feel the fear. Not of him. But of what he might say next. Jesus stepped aside. Behind him, the water rose like a curtain. And behind that curtain was a shape. It looked almost human. Almost. Do you want to know the truth about them? He asked me. Not the truth from books. Not the truth from pain. The truth from before all of that. And when he said them, I knew who he meant. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, the river surged, and I was pulled under. Not drowning. Being shown. The water didn't drown me. It held me, like a memory you've tried to forget for so long that when it finally comes back, you mistake it for a dream. I wasn't cold. I wasn't wet. But I was seen, deeper than any body ever sees another. In that river, history didn't move in lines. It moved in rings, like tree growth or bruises. Every ripple was a century. Every current was a lie someone tried to live inside. And I saw them. Not the white people I knew, Sarah from the ER, old Mr. Weller who always gave me gum at the corner store. No, I saw the first ones. The ones who chose to be white before whiteness had a name. They weren't born white. Jesus was clear about that. They were born gray, soft-boned, ash-colored, scared of the dark in a world that had only just begun to sleep. They had once lived among the rest of us. Different, yes, but not apart. They had songs. Real ones. They had ceremonies, too, small fires under tall trees, hands in the dirt, children who danced like they were listening to the soil hum. But something happened. Something small, but hungry. It started as a whisper among them. The night is too long. The world is too loud. The others, too close. The whisper grew into a language. That language became rules. Those rules became a wall. And when they had walled themselves off from the dark, they looked around and said, "We are not like them." Jesus showed me a moment like a photograph trapped in rain. A gathering. Faces pale, covered in white clay. They stood in a frozen field under a pale sky. One by one, they stepped into a shallow basin filled with snowmelt and bone dust, and whispered a vow. I renounce the dark. I choose the light. But it wasn't light they chose. It was bleaching, of memory, of skin, of soul. They turned from the dark not because it was evil, but because it was true. And truth scared them more than death. They thought purity meant absence. So they began to remove color, rhythm, earth, woman, story, doubt. Until all that remained was echo. And that echo became whiteness. Not a race. Not a people. A spell. A forgetting so deep it convinced them they had never been anything else. But why? I cried out from inside the river. Why would they choose that? The water trembled. Not from me. From him. Jesus stood at the edge of the current, and his voice came like thunder held inside a whisper. Because the truth was too beautiful. And they did not believe they deserved it. The moment he said that, I felt something twist in me, like a nail being unscrewed from my spine. They didn't hate us at first. They envied us. And envy, when it curdles, becomes cruelty. They saw our dark skin not as a threat, but as a mirror. They saw our dancing as defiance, when it was actually worship. They saw our singing as rebellion, when it was actually remembering. They saw our joy, and called it noise. Our power, and called it danger. Our love, and called it lust. Because they could not believe a people so kissed by the sun could live so close to the truth without burning. So they tried to break us. To silence the song. But the thing about rhythm is, it doesn't need permission. The river showed me, our ancestors humming while picking cotton. Humming while birthing babies into bondage. Humming while being hung from trees. Because even in death, we kept beating time. And then Jesus looked at me. They made whiteness to forget who they were. But you were made to remember. I wanted to scream. To beg. To say I didn't ask for this knowledge. But the river doesn't care what you want. It shows what you're ready for. And I was ready. For the truth. There is a sound that isn't made with a mouth. It's the sound of things that used to sing but forgot how. That's what I heard next. After the river let me sink through its currents like a pearl sinking through syrup, I landed in a place where the air didn't echo. It absorbed. No walls. No sky. Just distance. Infinite and velvet black. And I heard them. At first I thought it was wind. But there was no wind here. Just voices. Thousands. Maybe millions. Trying to sing, but having no tongues. They moaned, but the moan had no note. They cried, but the cry had no shape. It was like listening to a choir of unfinished people. I turned and saw them. They were pale, but not in color. In presence. Their skin shimmered like ash mixed with milk. Their eyes were wide but not open. Their mouths moved, endlessly, but no sound came out that could reach the heart. What is this place? I asked. Jesus was beside me again, silent, solemn, looking not at me, but through the veil between realms. This is where the singers go when they have spent their lives silencing others, he said. I felt my knees want to buckle, but here there was no gravity. Just truth. It held you up even when you wanted to fall. Are they being punished? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No. They are living in what they chose. A world without depth. A heaven made of mirrors. I looked again, and I saw men in powdered wigs writing laws with hands that used to pray under African stars. Women in corsets teaching silence as virtue, who once danced barefoot on red soil. Children, pale and frightened, being told by parents with erased names, "You are better than them." And so they believed it. And they built a world of separation. And when they died, they came here, because where else would they go? They forgot the song, Jesus said. And you can't enter the kingdom unless you can remember your note. That's when I felt it, deep in my own chest. A vibration. It wasn't fear. It wasn't grief. It was rhythm. Mine. Every soul, he told me, has a rhythm. Yours might be a drumbeat, or a hum, or the click of a grandmother's tongue as she folds laundry. But once you lose it, once you trade it for approval, for status, for survival, you become like them. Weightless. Voiceless. Remembered by no one. But can they be saved? I whispered. He looked at me. And there was no anger in his eyes. Only deep, aching sadness. Only if they listened to those they tried to silence. Only if they kneeled to the very songs they buried. Behind him, I saw a child, white, translucent, afraid, reaching out to a dark-skinned woman made of light and shadow. The woman didn't speak. She sang. Low and ancient, a note so round it made the whole realm shake. And I saw the child's mouth begin to close. Not in shame. In listening. For the first time. And I understood. Some of them are waking up. Some of them are still reachable. But only if we stop whispering when we should be singing. Jesus turned to me, and his voice was thunder this time. Your voice is not for decoration. Your story is not for sale. Your skin is not a burden. It is the map home. I started to cry. Not because I was afraid. But because for the first time in my life, I felt how much I had survived. And how sacred that survival was. I thought nothing could frighten me more than the choir without tongues. I was wrong. The river carried me forward, not fast, not slow, but with the patient weight of something that knew where it was going and didn't care how I felt about it. I rose from the water and stood on glass. A perfect surface. Smooth, cold, and endless. Beneath my feet, a mirror. And in it, me, but wrong. She looked like me, sure. Same face, same eyes. But her smile was too wide. Her hands too still. Her skin too polished, like it had never known sun or sorrow. She looked safe. Safe the way white people mean it. Smiling without history. Laughing without context. Jesus stood beside me, and the mirror woman smiled wider. Then she began to speak, but the voice was not mine. It was television voice. Commercial voice. A voice made for calm white rooms and bank loans. I don't see color, she said. Slavery was a long time ago. You're being too sensitive. We all struggle. Why make everything about race? And with each word, her smile cracked a little more, until her lips peeled back entirely. Revealing teeth. Not rows. Circles. Mouths inside mouths, all speaking at once in a language made of apologies that meant nothing and compliments that stung. You're so articulate. I voted for Obama. Can I touch your hair? The mirror pulsed. And then I saw them. Behind the glass, white people, but not as individuals, more like a single writhing presence. A body made of arms clutching pearls and mouths saying, "Not all of us." Their faces shimmered like reflections on water, impossible to grab, impossible to hold accountable. "What is this?" I asked Jesus. "This is the defense," he said. "Where whiteness guards its lie." The lie wasn't that they were evil. The lie was that they were innocent. That they had done nothing. That they had no inheritance. That history began the day they were born. "They are afraid," he said, "of becoming what they did. And so they look into the mirror and see us, but only the versions of us that do not disturb the illusion. Respectable. Forgiving. Apolitical. Polite. Not too loud. Not too black. Not too true." The defense is where black truth goes to be translated into something safe enough to sell. And the longer you stare into that mirror, the more you forget what you really look like. That's when I realized I'd been here before. Every time I bit my tongue when someone said something not racist, just ignorant. Every time I let a patient call me girl like I was their maid. Every time I told myself, it's not worth the fight. I'd been here. Feeding the mirror. And the mirror had teeth. So how do I break it? I asked. Jesus looked me full in the face now. No sadness. No softness. Just truth. "You don't," he said. "You walk past it. And you sing as loud as you can while you go." I stood on that mirror, barefoot, heart pounding. And I opened my mouth. At first, nothing came out but breath. But then. A note. Low. Like mourning doves. Then stronger. A song my grandmother used to hum while shelling peas. A song from before my name. From before their forgetting. And with every note, the glass cracked. Not shattered. Not yet. But it remembered. And that was enough. The mirror faded behind me like fog dissolving into air. What replaced it was green. Not the lush green of forests or the thick green of backyards after spring rain, no. This was artificial green. Too perfect. Too even. Grass that never knew mud. Trees that never dropped leaves. It stretched endlessly in every direction, a world made of comfort. And everywhere I looked, they were smiling. White faces, men, women, children, dressed like Sunday morning at Whole Foods. Linen pants, hiking shoes, clean fingernails, and soft, earnest eyes. They were eating berries. Reading bell hooks. Petting black babies in woven slings. Listening to jazz on vinyl. Wearing shirts that said, "Be kind." I knew this place. I'd been invited to it. Picnics in liberal suburbs. Book clubs about race relations. Panels titled Diversity in the Workplace. I'd sat among them. I'd watched them nod while I spoke, then change the subject when I cried. This was the field of good intentions. Jesus was not beside me now. He stood far off, at the edge of the grass, watching with eyes like still water. I walked through them, these smiling people, and none of them saw me. Not really. They smiled at the idea of me. They loved black culture. But not black grief. They loved black joy. But not black rage. They had signs in their yards, "Hate has no home here," right next to HOAs that quietly evicted black renters. One of them finally turned to me. A white woman, hair in a silver braid, her voice as gentle as yoga music. "I see you," she said. And I asked her, "What exactly do you see?" She paused. Smiled wider. "Your light," she said. "Your resilience. Your beauty." "What about my anger?" I asked. What about the way I want to scream every time you smile at me instead of speaking up when your cousin says thug? What about the way you flinch when I mention reparations? What about the way you apologize instead of change? The woman's smile cracked, but only slightly. I didn't mean to offend, she whispered. I'm doing my best. And that's when I saw it. Beneath the field, just under the grass, was a network of roots. Black hands. Reaching up. Holding the entire field in place. Our pain, the foundation. Our patience, the irrigation. Our survival, the shade they picnic under. And yet they never look down. They never ask what holds them up. They do not mean harm, Jesus said from the edge. But they do harm anyway, I answered. He nodded. The danger of whiteness is not just in the fists. It's in the smiles. The silence. The soft lies told with good manners. What am I supposed to do? I asked. You must not confuse kindness with clarity, he said. And you must stop shrinking to make them comfortable in the shadow of your truth. My feet began to burn. Not with pain. With memory. Every time I swallowed the truth because I didn't want to seem aggressive. Every time I smiled through a wound. Every time I called it progress just because someone listened without interrupting. I stepped off the field. And it shook. Not violently. Not yet. But enough for some of them to glance down, confused. One day, I thought, they'll hear the hands that hold them. One day, they'll stop smiling and start listening. But not today. I left the smiling field behind me. And the moment I did, the light changed. It wasn't day or night. It was like walking into the pages of an old book, the kind left too long in a sunlit attic, stained with dust and whispers. There was no sky. Just rafters. No ground. Just red clay, warm and breathing. And ahead of me, a schoolhouse. But not the kind from history books. This one was crooked, sagging with age, and made from different woods, some bark still clinging to the walls like skin not ready to let go. Its door was open, but not welcoming. Its windows blinked slowly, like they were still waking from a long sleep. Above the doorway, carved into the grain of the wood. What you know must die. Jesus did not enter with me. He simply nodded, once. A gesture of blessing or warning, I couldn't tell. So I stepped inside. And the door closed behind me without a sound. Inside was nothing at first. Just silence and the smell of fire that had already burned out. Then I saw them, desks, row after row, carved from roots and bone, not factory wood. Each one had a child sitting in it. Black children. Some were no older than 7. Others ancient, with eyes full of thunderclouds and moonlight. All of them looked at me as if they had been waiting. At the front of the room stood a teacher, or something older than that. A woman with skin like bark, hair full of feathers, and eyes that had no white in them, only constellations. She didn't smile. You're late, she said. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth felt full of ash. She pointed to an empty desk, no chair, just a flat stone carved with symbols I didn't know but somehow remembered. I sat. And then the learning began. No words. No chalkboard. Just heat. The walls began to glow, not with fire, but with memory. Not mine. Ours. I saw the ships. The chains. The prayers whispered through teeth cracked by iron. But deeper than that, I saw the before. I saw women painted in ochre, dancing on riverbanks with knives and laughter. I saw men in golden robes speaking to thunder as if it were a brother. I saw children playing with shadows, naming them like pets. I saw the names they stole from us, whole languages swallowed by Europe like fire drinks dry grass. And for every vision, a pain split open in my chest. Because to see it was to feel what was taken. And to know it had never really left. What is this? I whispered. The children turned to me, every single one, and spoke together. This is what they call myth. But it is your memory. And the teacher nodded. You cannot carry whiteness and truth at the same time, she said. So it must be burned out of you. The pain began in my fingertips. Then it climbed. Not flames, but forgetting, burned off me in layers. All the lies I'd swallowed. That Africa was savage. That slavery was a footnote. That forgiveness is the highest virtue. That rage is unbecoming of a lady. All those lies, burned. Until only voice remained. Not my voice alone. But the voice of every ancestor who ever kissed the earth in defiance. When it was over, I collapsed forward onto the desk. Sweating. Crying. And clean. Not whole. Not yet. But cleared. The teacher walked over and pressed her hand to my back. And she whispered. Now you may begin to speak. There are gardens that feed the body. There are gardens that heal the mind. And then there are gardens that remember what was taken. This was the third kind. When I stepped out of the schoolhouse, the world was no longer made of time. The trees didn't cast shadows. The sky was no longer above me, it surrounded me, like a womb made of ash and light. I walked barefoot. The ground here was soft, but not soil. It felt like hair. Thick, braided, tangled, generations of it. Twisting beneath my feet like rivers that hadn't run in centuries. In the center of it all was the garden. Not rows of vegetables. Not pretty little flowers arranged for aesthetic. This was not for decoration. This was grave in Genesis. Every plant was growing from something buried. I knelt. And the first root I touched shivered. A voice rose up, low and cracked. I was a midwife hanged for knowing when blood meant birth and when it meant death. Another root. I was sold pregnant. Twice. They told me my baby would be better off on the other side. Another. They silenced me with a Bible and called it salvation. I looked around. There were thousands of them. Black women. Priestesses turned into maids. Doctors turned into property. Prophets turned into whispers. Why were they buried here? I asked the air. And the earth answered. Because truth is always buried beneath convenience. I wept. Because I knew this garden. I had walked in it without realizing. Every time I apologized for being too much. Every time I bit back the truth to seem professional. Every time I held up a broken system with my labor, my patience, my smile. I was walking across their graves. Jesus appeared beside me, but he did not speak. He knelt too. And began to dig. With his bare hands. Through root and braid and history. Until he pulled from the soil a skull, small, polished, wrapped in silk. She spoke the name of God in her mother tongue, he said. So they called it witchcraft. He laid the skull back down, gently, and covered her again with soil and prayer. You cannot rise until you mourn, he told me. Not just your own pain. But the pain you carry without realizing. The inherited ache of your grandmothers, locked in your muscles, your voice, your silence. I looked down. My own hands were trembling. Not with fear, but with recognition. I had been told to heal others. To serve. To endure. But never to grieve. Not like this. So I did. I screamed. I howled. I sang every name I knew and then made up new ones. I laid my palms on the roots and wept until salt pooled in my fingerprints. And when it was done, the garden shifted. Not forward. Not back. Up. One of the roots split open, and from it, a tree began to rise. Its bark was dark as my skin. Its leaves shimmered like Kent cloth. Its fruit looked like stars wrapped in umbilical cords. It grew from grief. And it tasted like truth. When I stepped away from the garden, the air grew heavy, thick as molasses, as if the sky itself had folded over, weighing down on me. Before me rose a house. Not a humble cabin or a simple home, but a mansion, sprawling, ornate, and chillingly pristine. Its walls gleamed with a sheen of polished promises, its windows like eyes watching, never blinking. This was the house that lies built. I pushed open the grand front door. Inside, the air smelled of old paper, perfume, and fear disguised as civility. Each room was a world unto itself. The library, shelves filled with law books, sermons, and history texts, their pages whispering half-truths and edited stories. The ballroom, where politicians and preachers danced around the truth, spinning webs of freedom while chains clinked beneath their feet. The kitchen, where stories were cooked and recooked, flavors altered to make the bitter taste more palatable. And in the basement, the heart of the house, I found the vault. It held the stolen voices, recordings, files, photos, evidence locked away behind steel doors and layers of denial. I realized, this mansion wasn't just a building. It was a fortress of forgetfulness. A place where whiteness built its safety on the stolen stories of black bodies. And in that silence, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down on my chest. Jesus stood at the foot of the stairs. "This is the place where lies grow roots," he said quietly. "But even the deepest roots can be pulled." I clenched my fists. The house that lies built may be vast, but it is not unbreakable. The basement was cold, but the silence wasn't. From the shadows, a low hum began, soft, tentative, like a breath held for centuries. Then it grew, swelling into a chorus. Voices, many and one. Black voices. Not quiet prayers, but roaring anthems. Songs of pain, songs of joy, songs that folded pain into power. I saw faces in the dark, ancestors, their mouths open wide, singing us back to ourselves. Their voices wove through me, stitching wounds I didn't know were open. I tried to join in. At first, my voice was broken, cracked by years of silence, swallowed rage. But the choir held me. Lifted me. Until my song was no longer mine alone. It was every woman who dared to speak. Every child who dared to dream. Every soul who dared to resist. The house that lies built trembled. The walls cracked. Light poured in. And I knew. The choir was never silenced. It was waiting. Waiting to be heard. After the choir's song filled the basement, I thought the silence would break forever. But when I emerged, the world had changed, yet stayed the same. Voices rose around me, voices about me, but never to me. The white noise of America. It wasn't just sound. It was a veil, static that blurred edges, dimmed colors, and twisted words. Why bring up race again? Can't we just move on? You're making this about you. Don't you think you're being too sensitive? Each phrase was a thread, weaving a net around me, tight enough to hold, light enough to deny. I tried to speak, but the veil swallowed my words. I tried to fight, but it was exhausting. Even Jesus stood silent, watching. The veil wasn't just ignorance or cruelty. It was a defense mechanism, an endless white noise that numbs the senses and wears down the soul. I realized then. To be heard, the choir's song must cut through the static. But first, I had to learn to listen past the noise. I found myself standing before a mirror, not just any mirror, but one that showed everything I feared and tried to hide. My face fractured into 1,000 shards, each reflecting a different story. The angry black woman. The invisible laborer. The silent survivor. The invisible threat. The exoticized body. The erased history. Each shard screamed. I reached out to touch the glass, but it cut me, sharp edges slicing through my skin and soul. Jesus appeared behind me, calm as ever. The mirror shows what the world has broken, he said softly. But it also shows what must be reclaimed. I gathered the shards, one by one. They wouldn't fit together neatly. But in their brokenness, I saw my truth, complex, raw, whole in its imperfection. I realized the mirror could be rebuilt, not to reflect others' lies, but my own story. The shattered mirror burned in my hands. Not with smoke or ash, but with something older, a heat that woke muscles and memories I thought were dead. The flames weren't destroying me. They were lighting me up. I felt rage sharpen into clarity. Grief deepen into wisdom. Fear melt into fierce love. Jesus stood close, the fire reflecting in his eyes. The fire within you is the truth they tried to erase, he said. Let it burn, but do not be consumed. I embraced the heat. Not as punishment, but as power. The frame around the fire, my frame, held it steady, shaped it into a force that could not be ignored. This was the beginning of my real awakening. The fire inside me blazed, lighting a path I both feared and knew was inevitable. Before me stretched a threshold, heavy, ancient, carved with names no one dared speak aloud. Crossing it meant leaving behind comfort, silence, and safety. It meant standing naked before the world's judgment, and my own. Jesus stood at my side, steady and unwavering. To walk through this gate is to choose truth over peace, he said. My breath caught. Peace had always felt like a distant dream, one bought with my silence and sacrifice. But truth. Truth was a storm. And I was ready to face it. With every step forward, the ground trembled beneath me. Not in fear, but in promise. The reckoning had begun. I stepped through the threshold, and the world caught fire. Not the kind that destroys buildings or forests. But a fire that sears the lies, the silence, the betrayals. It burned through history books rewritten. Through sermons twisted to silent screams. Through the polite smiles that hid the sharpest knives. The fire was truth. It demanded acknowledgement. It demanded justice. It demanded healing. I was both the flame and the fuel. I roared with the ancestors. Their pain ignited my voice. Their hope fueled my courage. Jesus stood with me, his eyes fierce with love and fury. This fire will cleanse, not consume, he promised. I let the flame rise. Because only through the reckoning could new life be born. The ashes settled. But the silence did not return. From the smoldering ruins of the old world, a song rose, raw, aching, unstoppable. It was the voice of every mother who had been buried in the garden. Every ancestor whose names had been erased. Every child who had dared to dream beyond the lies. I stood at the center of the fire's glow, my body trembling, not with fear, but with power. Jesus came to me, no longer distant or watching, but walking beside me as an equal. You have seen what others refuse to see, he said. You have carried the weight so others might walk free. Tears fell, not of sorrow, but of release. The chains that once bound my spirit shattered like glass. The mirror was whole again, not perfect, but real. The garden bloomed beneath my feet, wild and fierce and free. I raised my voice, no longer silent, no longer afraid. The Resurrection Song. A hymn of truth, pain, love, and unbreakable hope. And as it poured from me, I knew this was not an end, but a beginning.